In the heart of a close-knit village nestled between rolling hills and thick forests, where every face was familiar and every story woven into the fabric of community life, there was a sacred belief that twins held a special place in the world. They were seen not just as siblings but as two halves of a whole, bound by an unbreakable spiritual thread. To lose one twin was not just a loss for the family but a cosmic rupture, a fracture in the delicate balance that kept the village's harmony intact. The young woman at the center of this story, named Amara, was one half of such a pair. Her twin sister, Zola, had been her constant companion from birth. They moved through life like reflections of one another. Laughter, secrets, even their dreams seemed intertwined. The villagers often said that if you looked closely, you could see their spirits dance in sync, their shadows merging as one beneath the sun. But when Zola passed away suddenly, the village's world was shaken, and more so, Amara's heart shattered in ways no one could truly understand. Grief, the villagers believed, was not just an emotion but a force that could ripple through the very soul. Amara's sorrow was magnified by a cruel twist of fate. She was forbidden from attending her twin's funeral. The reasons given were steeped in ancient customs and fear. The elders claimed that the presence of the surviving twin at the funeral might disturb the delicate passage of the departed spirit to the ancestral realm. The family, torn between tradition and compassion, had no choice but to comply. The morning of the funeral was thick with mist and silence. Amara stood at the edge of the village, her eyes fixed on the procession winding toward the burial grounds. Her heart ached with longing and helplessness, but even more unsettling was the sensation she felt when she glanced down. Her shadow was not whole. It split in two directions as if one part of her was anchored to where she stood, while the other stretched toward the distant gravesite. The villagers noticed too, whispering in hushed tones about the eerie sign, a shadow split like a fractured soul, a spirit torn between worlds. This split shadow became a symbol of her unresolved grief and the invisible wound that no ritual could heal. Amara's days became filled with a strange duality. She moved through the village as if physically present but emotionally divided, one part trapped in the present, the other lost in the memories of her sister. Her shadow's strange behavior unsettled the people. Some avoided her, fearing the broken spirit, while others looked on with a mixture of pity and reverence. The fractured shadow also marked the beginning of a journey neither Amara nor the village could have foreseen, a path where grief, tradition, and the supernatural would collide. It was a reminder that even in a world governed by rituals and beliefs, the human heart could resist the neat closures the elders desired. The shadow split was a living testament to the truth that some losses could not be contained or silenced. As days passed, Amara felt the weight of the split shadow grow heavier. It followed her silently, a constant companion that mirrored her sorrow. At night, when the village slept, she could swear she saw the two parts moving independently, one reaching out in search of her sister, the other rooted in the harsh reality of loss. It was as if her very essence was caught between worlds, unwilling or unable to move on. In this village where shadows were believed to carry the soul's essence, the broken shadow was more than a mere curiosity, it was a sign of spiritual unrest. The elders murmured about ancient prophecies and the possibility that Amara's twin bond had created a rift too deep to be mended by ordinary means. Meanwhile, Amara herself wrestled with the profound loneliness of missing her twin's farewell and the growing sense that her life would never be whole again. This was the beginning of a story marked by pain, mystery, and the search for healing. A story where the past's grip was both a curse and a guide. Amara's fractured shadow was a constant reminder of the ties that bind us beyond death and the shadows that linger long after the light fades. Amara and Zola's childhood was one woven from the threads of closeness so profound it often seemed impossible to separate where one ended and the other began. From the moment they were born, the village saw them not simply as two children but as one soul inhabiting two bodies, an embodiment of unity and harmony that brought joy and hope to every corner of their community. Their bond was the kind of connection that transcended ordinary understanding, felt by all who witnessed it as something sacred, almost magical. Their earliest memories were shared in tandem. Whether they were playing beneath the ancient baobab tree, their fingers entwined as they whispered secrets the world could not hear, or laughing together under the golden sun as if they breathed the same air, it was clear they were inseparable. The villagers often said that when Amara smiled, Zola's laughter followed instantly, and when Zola's eyes sparkled with mischief, Amara's heart skipped in response. They were like two halves of a mirror, perfectly reflecting each other's emotions and thoughts, communicating without words, connected through an invisible thread of spirit and heart. In the village, twins were considered sacred, a blessing from the ancestors. The elders believed that twins carried the wisdom of the past and the promise of the future. Their arrival was marked by rituals and celebrations, songs sung to honor the strength and unity embodied in their shared existence. Amara and Zola grew up wrapped in this cultural embrace, aware of the weight of expectations but also the honor bestowed upon them. The entire village saw them as symbols of balance and protection, and many sought their blessings during difficult times, believing that the twins held a special power to heal and to guide. From the moment they learned to walk, the twins moved almost as one. Their footsteps were synchronized, their shadows intertwined beneath the sun. At school they shared a single book, turning pages together and finishing each other's sentences. At night, their dreams often overlapped, sometimes even mixing in strange and beautiful ways, leaving them waking with shared memories of places and feelings beyond the waking world. Their bond was a living, breathing force that shaped every aspect of their young lives. But the depth of this connection also meant that the loss of one twin was not simply a family tragedy, it was a rupture felt through the entire village, a wound that touched every heart. When Zola fell ill suddenly, the community watched with bated breath, praying for a miracle that never came. Amara's grief was immediate and overwhelming. It was as though a part of her own spirit had been severed, leaving a void so vast it swallowed the light from her days and haunted her nights. The day of Zola's funeral was etched into the memory of every villager. The usually vibrant community was subdued, wrapped in a heavy silence that spoke of collective mourning. The rituals performed were ancient and profound, meant to guide Zola's spirit safely to the ancestors. Yet, for Amara, forbidden from attending, the day was a cruel exile, deepening the trauma beyond words. The village felt her absence keenly, a silent testament to the fractured bond that no ritual could heal. In the months that followed, the village grappled with the absence of Zola and the profound change in Amara. The girl who had once been full of light now walked with a shadow over her soul, her laughter dimmed, her eyes reflecting the pain of loss. Those who had once celebrated the twins now viewed Amara through a veil of sorrow and caution, unsure how to approach the living half of a sacred whole that seemed broken. Yet even in this darkness, the bond between the sisters endured. Amara spoke often of feeling Zola near, in the whispering wind, the rustling leaves, the quiet moments before dawn. The village, bound by tradition and fear, was hesitant to believe these stories, but some elders remembered the old ways, those that said the bond between twins was not broken by death but transformed into something mysterious and powerful. This profound connection shaped Amara's path forward. It was a source of strength and a wellspring of pain, a reminder that the spirit, once intertwined, does not simply disappear but lingers, shaping the living in ways unseen. The twin bond, celebrated in life, now became a haunting echo in death, a call to remember and to heal. The story of Amara and Zola was not just one of loss but of enduring love and the power of connection that defies even death itself. In the village's collective memory, their bond became a symbol, a reminder that even when one part of a soul is taken, the other carries on, forever touched by the presence of the other, moving through the world with a shadow that tells a story of both heartbreak and hope. In the days leading up to Zola's funeral, an invisible yet unyielding barrier was woven around Amara, a barrier constructed not by her own will but by the hands of those who controlled the village's fate and traditions. It was a force both tangible and intangible, made of whispered warnings, stern commands, and the heavy weight of superstition, that kept her from stepping foot where her heart most longed to be. The village elders, draped in their ceremonial robes, held the power to shape the rituals that governed life and death. To them, the twins were not just children but living embodiments of ancient pacts and spiritual balance. Zola's passing was a sorrow that touched everyone, but it was also a moment charged with danger, an uncertain fracture in the delicate weave of tradition. The elders feared that Amara's presence at the funeral might disrupt the rites, or worse, awaken restless forces they could not control. They gathered in the shadowed council hut, voices low and urgent, debating fiercely. Some argued that Amara's grief was too raw, that her spirit, still entwined with Zola's, might unsettle the carefully prepared ceremonies. Others saw her presence as a threat to the village's harmony. What if her sorrow summoned spirits that should remain at rest? The elders had witnessed too many stories of grief spiraling into chaos, of cursed souls seeking vengeance or solace in ways that left devastation in their wake. Beyond the elders' fears, deeper currents stirred, old grudges and jealousies that stretched back generations. Amara's family, tangled in quiet rivalries and unspoken resentments, bore their own complicated feelings. Her stepbrother in particular harbored a dark blend of jealousy and bitterness, viewing Amara's closeness to Zola as a threat to his place in the family and the village's social order. He whispered to those around him, planting seeds of suspicion and fear, suggesting that Amara's grief was less about love and more about defiance. Superstition wove itself tightly into the fabric of village life, dictating what was acceptable and what was taboo. To see twins as sacred also meant recognizing that their spirits were powerful and unpredictable. The elders believed that Amara's presence at the funeral might break the thin veil between the living and the dead in a way that could bring harm. There were whispered warnings of shadow sickness, a malady said to strike those who dared to challenge the natural order by meddling too deeply in the realms of spirit and flesh. Some villagers, caught between empathy and fear, quietly supported the decision to keep Amara away. Mothers cautioned their children not to draw near her, elders told stories warning of the dangers of twin spirits, and even friends kept their distance. The weight of collective anxiety pressed down on Amara, isolating her in a moment when she needed connection most. Yet, beneath the surface, there were those who questioned the elders' motives. A few young women who had grown up playing with the twins whispered doubts about the necessity of excluding Amara. They saw in her a strength and purity that deserved honor, not banishment. But their voices were small against the roaring tide of tradition and fear. Amara herself was caught in this storm of forces beyond her control. The pain of losing Zola was compounded by the cruelty of exclusion, a wound inflicted not by death but by those sworn to protect her. She felt torn between her own desire to mourn openly and the harsh reality of being silenced. The loneliness settled deep in her bones, a cold reminder that grief could be both a private sorrow and a public spectacle governed by others' will. This enforced separation shaped the contours of Amara's mourning. She grieved in secret, in stolen moments beneath the moonlight and the whispering trees, carrying the weight of her sorrow alone. The village watched, uncertain and uneasy, as her shadow seemed to fracture with every step, a silent testament to the broken bond between sisters and the fractures within the community itself. In the end, the forces that kept Amara from her twins' funeral were not simply about tradition or fear, they were about control. Control over the narrative of loss, over the power of grief, and over the legacy of two souls forever intertwined. The village sought to contain a wound too vast to heal quietly, to dictate who could bear witness to a love too deep to be silenced. But shadows, once split, refused to be contained forever. The fracture in Amara's soul would ripple through the village, unsettling old orders and awakening truths that could no longer be hidden. Her absence at the funeral marked the beginning of a story that was as much about rebellion as it was about sorrow, a story that would echo in every shadow and every storm to come. From the moment Amara was forced to miss Zola's funeral, the world around her seemed to change in ways no one could explain. The village, already thick with grief and whispered fears, now found itself confronted with a phenomenon that defied logic and tradition, the fracturing of Amara's shadow. What began as a subtle oddity soon became a haunting symbol of loss and divided soul, setting her apart in ways more profound than any word or wound could. At first it was barely noticeable. In the flickering light of the dawn, as Amara stepped out from the shelter of her home, her shadow appeared just as any shadow should, attached firmly to her feet, following her movements silently. But as the day wore on, those watching closely might have seen something strange. Her shadow seemed to hesitate, to flicker between two shapes as if torn in two directions at once. By evening the fracture became unmistakable. Where once there had been a single dark silhouette trailing her every step, there were now two distinct shadows, each moving with a life of its own. Sometimes one shadow would lag behind, reluctant to follow. At other times, they would split apart completely, drifting away from each other on the dusty village paths. To the villagers, it was as though Amara's very essence had been divided, her shadow now a ghostly twin, a silent witness to her fractured soul. The villagers' reaction was a mixture of awe and dread. Many whispered that the split shadow was a sign, an omen of the unnatural rupture caused by her absence at the funeral. In their eyes, the shadow's fracture was no mere trick of the light but a visible manifestation of the spiritual imbalance brought on by grief left unspoken and rites left unfulfilled. For Amara, the shadow's separation was deeply personal and terrifying. The fractured shadow mirrored the turmoil that churned inside her, a grief so profound it fractured her identity. She felt as if a part of herself had been torn away, wandering lost somewhere between the worlds of the living and the dead. The shadow, once a quiet follower, now acted independently, sometimes mimicking her movements, sometimes drifting as if recalling memories she could no longer grasp. One evening, as the village was cloaked in twilight, Amara noticed something extraordinary. Her shadow, or rather one half of it, began to detach and move toward the old baobab tree at the village edge, a place sacred to ancestral spirits. Following cautiously, she watched in awe as the shadow stretched and shimmered, revealing faint outlines resembling her twin's form. It was as if Zola's spirit lingered there, bound to Amara by a tether unseen but unbreakable. The shadow seemed to speak in silence, carrying the weight of emotions and memories too deep for words. In the dark, Amara could sense her sister's presence, a quiet comfort amid the isolation imposed by others. This ghostly twin, this living shadow, became her companion, a bridge between loss and hope. Yet, the shadow's independence came with its own dangers. Sometimes, in moments of tension or fear, it would act unpredictably, stretching toward those who whispered cruel things, recoiling from the village elders who sought to suppress Amara's spirit. The villagers noticed scratches on fences, mysterious disturbances near homes of her detractors, and a strange chill in the air whenever the shadow seemed restless. Children, more sensitive to the unseen, spoke in hushed tones about seeing two figures walking at night, one solid and the other translucent, their laughter echoing faintly on the wind. Mothers would hush their little ones, telling them that the twins' bond was strong, but the split shadow was a warning, a reminder that grief and anger could manifest in powerful, unpredictable ways. Amara herself struggled to understand the shadow's nature. Was it merely a reflection of her pain, or was it something more, a vessel for her sister's spirit, a guardian sent from beyond the veil? At times, she felt the shadow's presence as a warm embrace, a silent vow that she was not alone. At others, it felt like a restless force, demanding justice for the betrayal she had endured. Her nights became restless, filled with dreams where the shadow would lead her through misty forests and ancient ruins, places where the boundaries between worlds blurred. In these visions, Zola's voice whispered through the darkness, guiding her toward truths the village feared to face. The fractured shadow was no longer just a mark of loss. It was a symbol of awakening, a harbinger of change. The elders grew uneasy as the shadow's power grew more apparent. Some argued that it was a dangerous curse that needed to be broken, others that it was a sacred sign of the twins' enduring connection. The debate deepened the village's divide, leaving Amara caught in the crossfire between fear and reverence. Through it all, the shadow remained constant, a living reminder that some bonds transcend death, that grief cannot be contained by walls or rituals. It was a silent testament to the sister who had been taken and the sister who remained, intertwined forever in light and dark. As seasons changed and the village moved slowly toward acceptance, Amara began to embrace the fractured shadow. It was no longer a mark of shame or fear but a symbol of resilience. Though broken, she was still whole, carrying within her the strength of two souls bound by love, loss, and an unbreakable bond. And so, the shadow that split became a guide, a protector, and a whisper of the past that could never be silenced. It danced at her feet, a living echo of a sister's love, reminding the village that even in sorrow there is power, and even in loss there is light. The days following the funeral were the heaviest Amara had ever known. Missing the final goodbye to Zola weighed on her like a stone chained to her heart, a burden she carried silently as she moved through the village. Every face she passed seemed to carry a mixture of pity, suspicion, or barely concealed disdain. In the eyes of the villagers, her absence at the funeral had shattered not only the ritual but also her place within the community, and slowly their alienation chipped away at her spirit. Morning light would find Amara sitting alone beneath the baobab tree where she and Zola had once played as children, the rough bark a familiar comfort against her skin. She traced her fingers through the dust, hoping to find some way to grasp the memories that no longer fit together. The ritual of mourning that she was denied left her caught in a limbo of sorrow, unable to say goodbye, yet unable to move on. The sharp ache of absence gnawed at her every waking moment, a hollow void that no prayers or whispered voices could fill. Each day brought fresh reminders of the loss she could not publicly grieve. The village moved on, continuing with the rhythms of life, planting, harvesting, celebrating, but for Amara time had fractured. Her shadow remained split, a constant reflection of her fractured soul and a silent, unyielding testimony to the invisible wounds she bore. People averted their eyes or whispered behind cupped hands when she walked by, unsure whether to offer comfort or suspicion. Some villagers pitied her, casting gentle glances but keeping a careful distance. They spoke in hushed tones of the broken girl who had missed the sacred farewell, suggesting that her soul might be lost or wandering. Others eyed her with suspicion, their fear growing alongside the strange happenings tied to her fractured shadow. Was she cursed? Or was there something more dangerous about her grief, a power that unsettled the balance of their world? Even her own family became a source of coldness. Her stepmother avoided her gaze, burdened by the shame of the scandal that Amara's absence had caused. Her father's once warm embrace grew infrequent and hesitant, as if uncertain how to comfort a daughter who bore an invisible wound too deep to heal. The isolation was most painful in those quiet moments when loneliness seeped through the cracks of her fractured spirit, leaving her gasping for connection in a world that had turned its back. The rituals she had longed to participate in, the lamentations, the communal prayers, the cleansing rites, went on without her, reinforcing her exclusion. She was no longer the beloved twin who had shared every secret and joy with Zola, but a shadowed figure, haunted by absence and marked by a presence that unsettled the village's fragile order. At night, her fractured shadow stretched and twisted, echoing her turmoil. It moved with a will of its own, a reminder that her grief was not hers alone to bear. Sometimes, it seemed to reach out for her twin, longing for the connection severed by death and denial. Other times, it recoiled, shielding her from the villagers' whispered accusations and wary stares. Amara found solace only in the quiet moments when the wind whispered through the trees, carrying faint echoes of Zola's voice. These ethereal conversations became her refuge, an unspoken dialogue that helped bridge the chasm left by loss. The shadow's presence, though unsettling, became a companion in her solitude, a living symbol of the twin bond that death could not sever. Yet the weight of being marked by absence was heavy. When she tried to explain her feelings or the strange occurrences surrounding her, the villagers dismissed her words as madness or trickery. The divide between her and the community grew, fostering a sense of otherness that was difficult to bear. In the marketplace, where once she had walked freely among friends and neighbors, she now felt eyes linger on her with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Children, who had once run alongside her and Zola, now whispered and darted away, unsure whether to approach the girl whose shadow was fractured and whose heart was broken. The village's suspicion was fueled further by the unexplained events linked to her presence. The strange scratches on fences, the flickering lights near her home, and the restless movements of her shadow. These signs were woven into a growing narrative of fear, isolating Amara even more. Some elders argued that her grief had opened a dangerous door, threatening to unleash forces the village was unprepared to face. Despite the alienation, Amara did not give in to despair. Deep within, she held onto the threads of hope that her bond with Zola remained unbroken, that one day, the village would understand the true nature of her loss. She sought strength in the stories her mother had told her about the resilience of the spirit and the power of love beyond death. In the quiet of the night, when the village slept under a blanket of stars, Amara would stand at the edge of the fields, whispering her sister's name into the wind. The fractured shadow beside her would stir, as if listening, as if reminding her that even in absence, love endures. Her life after loss was a delicate dance between sorrow and strength, isolation and connection, doubt and faith. Though the village struggled to accept her, and though the burden of absence pressed heavy on her heart, Amara's spirit remained unbroken. The shadow's fracture, once a mark of pain, began to hint at something deeper, a silent promise that healing, though slow, was possible. In time, the villagers' attitudes would shift. Seeds of understanding were planted in whispers and cautious glances. Those who had scorned her began to see the strength in her quiet endurance. Mothers, once wary, told their daughters stories of the twins, of love that death could not sever. The fractured shadow, once a symbol of loss and fear, grew into a beacon of resilience and hope. But the journey was long and the weight of absence never fully lifted. For Amara, every step forward was shadowed by the memory of the funeral she missed, and every breath was colored by the love and loss entwined within her fractured shadow. Yet, through it all, she lived, carrying her grief as both burden and blessing, walking the fine line between worlds, and holding fast to the unbreakable bond of twin souls. The nights after Zola's funeral grew heavy with an unspoken presence. Amara lay restless beneath the woven reed mat in her small hut, the flickering glow of the oil lamp casting long, trembling shadows along the earthen walls. The fractured shadow she carried was no longer just a silent mark of sorrow, it had begun to stir, whispering secrets in the dark and reaching beyond the boundary of the visible world. At first, it was subtle, a flicker, a movement in the corner of her eye, a soft breath of wind that carried an unfamiliar scent. But soon, the shadows deepened with meaning. One night, as the moon hung low and full, Amara saw her shadow move independently, twisting and shifting like a living thing, no longer bound solely to her movements. It stretched out toward the open window, fingers of darkness reaching for the stars as if seeking a message from realms unseen. She sat up, heart pounding, and spoke aloud, "Is that you, Zola?" The shadow pulsed in response, an answer she could feel in the quiet between the winds. Dreams became a channel for the twin spirit to cross into her world. In the twilight space between sleep and wakefulness, Amara found herself walking through misty forests where the air shimmered with the voices of ancestors. Zola's voice would call softly, a melody of reassurance and warning. Sometimes her twin spirit guided her to places forgotten by time, a gnarled tree where ancient rites were performed, a hidden spring whose waters healed the sick, or the village gate where memories clung like cobwebs. These nightly visions were vivid and real, leaving impressions on Amara's mind and body that no earthly experience could explain. When she awoke, her skin tingled as if kissed by unseen fingers, and her shadow lingered longer than it should, folding over the ground in strange shapes. Villagers noticed too. Some claimed the moonlight held magic when she walked beneath it, and others whispered that the twin spirit had chosen her as its vessel, bound not by death but by a sacred promise. One evening, the shadow moved toward her before she could move herself. It formed a shape, a hand, a face, a wave, signs meant to guide or warn. The first message was clear. Danger was near, lurking in the darkness beyond the village. Amara followed the shadow's silent urging, creeping through the narrow paths between huts until she found a small fire set by unknown hands. The flames licked at the thatched roofs, threatening to engulf the homes. With frantic cries, she alerted the villagers who rushed to douse the blaze before disaster struck. Word spread quickly that the fractured shadow was no mere curse but a guardian. The spirit of her twin was alive in the dark, moving to protect the girl and the village, even though many still feared what they could not understand. Children dared to follow Amara on moonlit nights, hoping to glimpse the shadow's mysterious dance, while elders muttered prayers to the ancestors, hoping for favor in these strange times. The connection between Amara and her twin spirit deepened with each passing day. She learned to listen, not only with her ears but with her heart and soul, to the quiet whispers that came through the shifting shadows. The twin spirit communicated in signs, a sudden breeze that chilled the skin, the rustling of leaves and patterns that spoke of warning or hope, or the way the stars aligned in the night sky to mark moments of significance. Sometimes the shadow acted on its own to protect her. When village children taunted Amara or hurled stones, shadows lengthened and twisted into forms that blocked the projectiles, sparing her from harm. On other nights, the shadow slipped from her feet and drifted silently to places where secrets were hidden or lies were spoken, revealing truths that might otherwise have remained buried. Amara's growing bond with the spirit world came with its own costs. The villagers' fear of her increased, their suspicion fueled by the unexplained and the supernatural. Some claimed she was bewitched, a witch who wielded dangerous powers. Yet others saw her as a bridge between worlds, a sacred medium who carried the wisdom and sorrow of the ancestors. This tension made her life precarious, walking the narrow path between reverence and fear. In quiet moments, Amara would reach out to the shadow with trembling hands, feeling the warmth of her twin's presence wrap around her like a cloak. The spirit's love and guidance sustained her through sleepless nights and lonely days. She learned to trust the shadow's warnings, sensing when to speak or stay silent, when to protect and when to seek help. One night, under a sky heavy with clouds, the shadow moved with urgency. It shaped itself into a series of symbols, lines, curves, and spirals, that Amara recognized from her childhood lessons with her grandmother. The signs spoke of an old enemy returning, one whose hatred had once threatened the village and whose shadow now crept once again. Armed with this knowledge, Amara prepared the village elders with the warnings carried by her twin spirit, beginning the slow process of healing old wounds and facing hidden dangers. The twin spirit, once silenced by death and denial, had found a voice in the fractured shadow, and through it, Amara's own voice grew stronger. She was no longer just a girl marked by loss but a living conduit of ancient power, an embodiment of love, memory, and resilience that the village could neither ignore nor fully understand. In this mysterious communion, Amara discovered that grief could be transformed into strength, and absence into presence. The twin spirit whispered through shadows, guiding her path, deepening their bond, and reminding all who witnessed it that even in the darkest loss, light endures. The village had always lived by the rhythms of nature, by the cycle of seasons, harvests, and sacred traditions passed down through generations. Yet now, something unsettled the air, a growing tension born not just of whispered rumors but of a palpable fear. It was the girl's shadow, fractured and restless, that had stirred this unease, rippling through the fabric of daily life like an unseen storm. At first, the villagers had only spoken of her absence at the funeral in hushed tones, pity mixing with suspicion. But as days turned into weeks and the strange phenomena surrounding Amara's shadow continued, fear began to take root. The shadow's split seemed unnatural, a mark of something beyond ordinary human experience. Mothers pulled their children closer when Amara passed by, and neighbors exchanged nervous glances, uncertain whether to approach or avoid her. In the gathering spaces, the open courtyard near the well, the shaded underbrush where the elders met, and even the market stalls where goods were traded, the talk inevitably turned to the girl and her shadow. Some said she was cursed, a vessel for a restless spirit that brought misfortune. Others whispered she was chosen, touched by the ancestors or the gods, destined for a fate greater than the village could comprehend. But what these beliefs shared was a common thread: uncertainty. The elders, keepers of tradition and wisdom, were the first to confront the mystery. They called a council, summoning the village leaders and respected figures beneath the great baobab tree, whose twisted roots anchored generations of history. The air was thick with anticipation and unease as the elders debated how to respond to the unsettling signs. "We cannot allow this shadow to spread fear among our people," the oldest elder intoned, his voice gravelly yet firm. "If the girl is cursed, her presence endangers us all. We must consider exile, for her safety and for the villages." Another elder, younger and more sympathetic, countered, "But if she is chosen, it would be a grave mistake to cast her out. The ancestors speak through her. We must seek to understand rather than fear." The tension between caution and reverence split the council. Some urged harsh measures, believing the fractured shadow a dangerous omen. They argued that tradition demanded purity and order, and anything disrupting that balance threatened the village's harmony. Others advocated for protection and respect, recalling stories of other gifted ones whose powers had saved the people in times of crisis. Outside the council, the villagers were equally divided. Those who feared Amara avoided her path, crossing to the other side or retreating indoors when she approached. They spoke in cryptic phrases: "The shadow moves on its own," or "She walks with two souls now." This fear bred superstition. Some claimed the shadow was a manifestation of dark magic, a curse placed by jealous spirits or evil neighbors. Others believed it to be a blessing, a sign that the village had been chosen for renewal through Amara's connection to the spirit world. This division extended even to those who had once been close to Amara. Her neighbors' children, once playmates, now looked at her with wide eyes filled with a mix of fear and fascination. They dared not join her in the fields or the river, whispering of ghostly fingers and silent warnings. Adults, too, struggled with their feelings. Some offered secret gifts or charms to protect her, while others avoided her presence altogether. In the marketplace, a woman approached Amara cautiously, offering a small bundle of herbs wrapped in cloth. "For protection," she whispered, eyes darting nervously. "Use them well." Amara accepted the gift with quiet gratitude, knowing that even kindness came wrapped in fear. Among the villagers, some sought to exploit the mystery for personal gain. A few whispered to the elders, suggesting that gaining favor with Amara and her shadow could grant access to unseen powers. These secret supplicants approached her under the cover of night, offering gifts and asking for blessings, while publicly maintaining distance. Amara sensed the hidden agendas but chose silence, understanding that her path was hers alone. The village's tension mounted with each passing day. Small disputes flared, accusations of witchcraft arose, and old grudges found new fuel. The sacred gate where her shadow's fracture had first been noticed became a place of unease, a boundary between fear and acceptance. Some villagers left offerings there, seeking to appease unseen forces, while others crossed themselves and hurried past. Amara felt the weight of all this unrest. The fractured shadow that had once been a silent companion now seemed a barrier between her and the community. She wrestled with loneliness, caught between the world she had known and the unknown future unfolding before her. Yet in the quiet moments, when the village slept and the moon's silver light bathed the earth, her shadow whispered its ancient promises, a reminder that she was not alone. One night, beneath a sky heavy with stars, Amara sought the elders herself. She found them gathered near the fire, their faces marked by worry and exhaustion. With steady voice, she spoke not as a frightened girl but as one who had embraced the mystery within her. "I am not cursed," she said, eyes steady in the firelight. "My shadow is fractured because my soul is broken, but it is also a sign that life and death are intertwined, that loss can be a path to power. I carry my twin spirit with me, and through this shadow, I am connected to all who came before." The elders listened in silence, some nodding slowly, others frowning with skepticism. The village's future hung in balance, swayed by fear, faith, and the fragile thread of hope Amara offered. Her words planted a seed that would take root in the hearts of some and be rejected by others. The village stood at a crossroads, its destiny shaped by how it would face the fractured shadow and the girl who bore it. In that moment, the unseen forces of fear and reverence wove together, marking the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Amara but for the entire community. The air was thick with anticipation as Amara prepared to leave the village behind. The fractured shadow that had followed her for months now flickered at her feet like a restless spirit, guiding her steps toward a path shrouded in mystery and ancient whispers. It was time to seek wholeness, not just for herself, but for the twin she had lost and the shadow that bore witness to their broken bond. Her journey began with a dream, vivid and strange. In it, the twin appeared beside her, their faces blurred but their presence unmistakable. They spoke in a voice like the rustling leaves, urging Amara to find the sacred river beyond the mountains where the sky touched the earth. There, the twin promised, the fractured shadow could be healed, and the pain that had cleaved them apart could finally mend. At dawn, Amara packed only what she could carry, a small satchel of herbs, a knife gifted by her grandmother, and a woven charm braided from her own hair. She walked quietly through the village, aware of eyes watching, some filled with hope, others with doubt. The path ahead was unknown and fraught with dangers, but the calling in her heart was stronger than any fear. The first leg of the journey led her through dense forest where sunlight barely pierced the canopy. The trees seemed alive, their branches whispering secrets as the shadow at her feet danced in patterns she could not yet understand. She felt the weight of her loss pressing in, the loneliness like a shroud wrapped tightly around her spirit. But even in the darkest moments, the shadow moved, sometimes stretching out, sometimes pulling close, reminding her she was not alone. One night, as the forest grew silent, Amara was startled awake by the faint sound of footsteps. She sat up, heart pounding, and saw a figure emerging from the shadows, an old woman with eyes sharp as flint and a presence both calming and commanding. The woman introduced herself as Nala, a healer and keeper of the ancient ways. She had been watching Amara's path from afar, drawn by the fractured shadow and the girl's determination. Nala offered to guide Amara through the spiritual trials that awaited, explaining that to heal the shadow, she must face not only the external world but the hidden corners of her soul. Together, they performed rituals beneath the stars, chanting incantations that called on ancestors and elements. Nala taught Amara how to listen, to the wind, the earth and most importantly to the whispers of her shadow. Days passed and the journey grew harder. Steep climbs tested Amara's strength, biting cold and fierce storms threatened to halt her progress. Each challenge was mirrored by visions, images of her twin, of their shared past and the moment their bond was shattered. Sometimes, the shadow would split even further, fracturing into thin wisps that drifted apart before rejoining her form. These moments shook her resolve but also deepened her understanding. Healing would require patience and courage beyond the physical. Along the way, Amara encountered others touched by the spirit world. In a small mountain village, she met a man whose own shadow was said to carry the memories of his ancestors. He shared stories of loss and redemption, reminding her that the journey toward wholeness was rarely straightforward. In the market town that followed, she found children weaving charms from river reeds and whispered prayers, echoing the new rituals growing in her home village. Yet not all encounters were kind. In a shadowed glen, a band of travelers, wary of anything strange, accused her of witchcraft. The tension escalated until the shadow itself responded, forming slender hands that reached out in warning, causing the would-be aggressors to flee in fear. This event marked a turning point. Amara understood that her power was no longer hidden but a living force she could call upon to protect herself and others. One evening, beneath a crimson sunset, Amara and Nala reached the edge of the sacred river, its waters shimmering with an otherworldly light. The air hummed with energy as Amara stepped forward, feeling the fractured shadow pulse at her feet. Together they performed the final ritual, an ancient rite of reunion and release. Amara braided strands of her own hair with river reeds and whispered the names of her twin and ancestors. As the ritual reached its crescendo, the fractured shadow began to merge, fingers weaving together, darkness knitting into light. A warmth spread through Amara's body, a healing that touched not just flesh and bone, but the deepest parts of her spirit. Tears streamed down her face, mingling with the river's cool flow. She was whole again but not without scars. The journey had left its mark, a testament to resilience and love beyond death. With the shadow restored, Amara felt a new strength, a harmony between past and present, loss and hope. She knew the path ahead would still hold challenges, but now she carried with her the legacy of two souls united. Returning to her village, she was no longer just the girl with the fractured shadow but a symbol of healing, courage, and the enduring bond of the twin flame. The village welcomed her home with a mixture of awe and reverence. The elders who had once debated her fate now bowed in respect. Children listened wide-eyed as she told stories of the journey, of shadows and spirits, and of the power that lies in embracing all parts of oneself. Amara's shadow no longer split but moved as one, a silent guardian and reminder of the twin who lived on within her. In time, the tale of the girl who journeyed beyond grief to reclaim her shadow became a legend, a story told by firesides and woven into the fabric of the village's history. And beneath the quiet stars, when the wind rustled through the trees and shadows danced softly on the ground, the villagers would smile, knowing that sometimes, even the darkest breaks can lead to the brightest healing. The moment Amara had both feared and yearned for was finally upon her. As twilight cloaked the village in hues of purple and deep blue, a restless energy thrummed in the air. The shadow at her feet, once fractured and trembling, now pulsed with a steady heartbeat of its own, a living echo of the bond that had never truly broken. Tonight, the final chapter of her journey would unfold, a reunion that would heal not only her fractured shadow but the wounds that had festered for so long. She stood at the edge of the ancient sacred grove, a place whispered about with reverence and dread by the villagers. The elders had long warned that this was a thin place, a doorway where the veil between worlds grew fragile, where spirits walked and truths could no longer hide in shadows. The grove was encircled by towering trees whose gnarled branches reached like grasping hands into the night sky. The ground beneath her feet was soft, carpeted with moss and fallen leaves, carrying the scent of earth and forgotten time. As Amara stepped into the grove, a cold wind stirred, rippling through the leaves and carrying a faint chorus of voices, whispers of ancestors, echoes of her twin's laughter, and the murmurs of the spirit realm. Her shadow flickered, growing larger and more defined, yet still holding the slight tremor of its past fracture. She reached out her hand to touch the dark shape, feeling a sudden warmth spread through her palm, as if the shadow itself was reaching back. The air thickened, and the boundary between the living and the spirit world began to blur. Mist rose from the earth, swirling in silver tendrils around Amara's feet. Shapes emerged from the fog, figures draped in flowing robes, faces serene yet inscrutable. The village elders appeared, their eyes heavy with regret and fear. They had gathered to witness the reckoning, those who had kept her away from her twin's funeral standing silently among the watching spirits. One elder stepped forward, his voice breaking the stillness. "You were meant to be separated, child. It was the will of the ancestors, the law of the village." Amara's gaze hardened. No law, no fear, no jealousy can sever the bond between souls bound at birth. The spirit realm responded with a low hum, a vibration that felt like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Amara closed her eyes, calling to her twin with all the strength she had left, the memories, the love, the grief that had fueled her entire journey. The shadow at her feet pulsed brighter, growing limbs made of woven darkness, fingers reaching out to the unseen. Suddenly, the mist parted, and before her stood the apparition of her twin, ethereal and shimmering, eyes filled with both sorrow and hope. The twin stepped forward, and the space between them shimmered like a fragile thread ready to snap. Yet neither moved away, instead they reached toward each other. As their hands nearly touched, the fractured shadow began to pulse violently, tendrils of darkness and light weaving into a single radiant form. The village elders watched in silence, some with awe, others with shame as the shadow's fracture sealed, a symbol of the reunion taking place not just in the spirit realm but within Amara herself. The twin's voice echoed softly, a whisper on the wind, "We are whole as we always were meant to be. Neither death nor distance can break the bond of our souls." Amara opened her eyes, feeling a deep peace settle within her. The shadow no longer split or trembled but moved in harmony with her, a living part of her being. The spirits surrounding them faded into the night, leaving behind a calm silence, as if the very earth exhaled in relief. Returning to the village, Amara was greeted not with suspicion but with reverence. The story of her reunion spread quickly, an emblem of hope and healing. The elders who once sought to keep her away from her twin's final goodbye now stood humbled, their fears dissolved in the face of undeniable truth. In time, the tale of Amara and her shadow became legend, told through generations as a reminder that love, grief, and the bonds of family transcend even the greatest divides. When the wind whispered through the trees or the shadows lengthened at dusk, villagers would remember the girl who faced the spirit world and returned whole, her shadow a testament to the enduring power of connection, forgiveness, and the journey to healing. Generations had passed since Amara's final reunion with her twin, yet the story of the woman with the split shadow remained alive, woven deep into the fabric of the village's collective memory. It was more than a tale, it was a living legacy, a symbol that echoed in the whispers of the wind, in the cracks of the ancient trees, and in the hearts of every villager who grew up hearing of the girl who defied death, grief, and fear. The village had changed much since those dark days when suspicion and superstition ruled. New homes had risen, children ran laughing through the fields, and elders still gathered beneath the great baobab tree to share stories under the starlit sky. Yet, no matter how many seasons passed, the legend of Amara and her fractured shadow endured. It had become a parable, a teaching tool for mothers and grandmothers who sought to prepare the next generation for the inevitable trials of life. On evenings thick with humidity and the scent of blooming jasmine, women would gather their children close, pulling them beneath woven mats or beside flickering fires. In hushed voices that mingled awe and solemnity, they recounted the tale. There was once a girl, born as one half of sacred twins, whose bond was so strong that not even death could tear it apart. But fate and fear conspired to keep her from her twins' final journey, and so her shadow, her very soul, was torn in two. Children's eyes would widen as the story painted vivid pictures of shadows that moved independently, of spirits whispering on the wind, and of a young woman's courage as she ventured into the spirit world to reclaim what was lost. The shadow, they learned, was more than a mere silhouette. It was a symbol of sorrow and strength intertwined, a reminder that grief could fracture a person, but resilience and love could heal the deepest wounds. With time, the split shadow became a powerful emblem etched onto ceremonial cloths and carved into the wood of doorways. During festivals honoring ancestors and twins, villagers would wear pendants shaped like two halves joining to make a whole, an homage to Amara's journey and the eternal bond she shared with her sister. These symbols served not just as decoration but as talismans, meant to protect families from the shadows of unresolved loss and remind them that no one should be kept from mourning their loved ones. Mothers, in particular, held the story close to their hearts. When their children faced hardship or felt the sting of separation and sorrow, they would remind them of Amara's bravery and the importance of honoring family. "Never let others control your grief," they would say gently. "Your heart belongs to you and those you love. Even when shadows fall long and deep, your spirit can rise." Schools in the village incorporated the story into their lessons, teaching children about the delicate balance between life and death, love and loss. Elders recounted how Amara's experience transformed the village's understanding of grief, from a force to be hidden or feared, to a sacred passage that connects generations and strengthens communal ties. The village shrine dedicated to twins became a pilgrimage site, with people from neighboring regions traveling to leave offerings and pay respects. Pilgrims spoke of feeling the presence of the twin spirits in the rustling leaves and shifting shadows, a living testament to the enduring power of their bond. They marveled at the gate, once the place of sorrow and division, now overgrown with vibrant vines that twisted like interlocking hands, symbolizing unity restored. Even the natural world seemed to echo the legacy. When the sun dipped below the horizon and the shadows stretched long across the land, villagers would pause, feeling the gentle brush of unseen hands and hearing the faintest whisper of a twin's voice carried on the breeze. It was said that on such evenings, Amara and her sister walked together once more, their spirits inseparable, guiding and guarding the village as they always had. The story of the woman with the split shadow was more than folklore. It was a living lesson etched into the hearts of the people, a reminder that grief and resilience are twin forces within us all. It taught that while loss can fracture the soul, it can also forge strength, wisdom, and an unbreakable bond that transcends even the darkest nights. And so, through generations, the legacy of Amara lived on, told and retold in the flickering glow of firelight, whispered in prayers and celebrated in rituals. The split shadow became a symbol of hope, healing, and the enduring power of family. In every tear shed, every story shared, and every shadow that stretched beneath the setting sun, the village remembered the girl who faced the impossible and emerged whole, teaching them all to honor their grief and embrace the bonds that no force, living or dead, could ever sever.